to in my previous stream, I would be going through some of the things that I am doing right now. Let me quickly. So this is the VM coordinator that is executing in the background. I will show you guys the where is it? The results, the initial set of results, and the checkpoints that you can go to. Not the checkpoints, the sweeps that you can go to. LLM architectures. Go to pull requests, and since I'm doing a PR based development, this is the summary of what we had to do. And this is right now stage 1 and stage 2, stage 2B, 2E, 2F, 2C, and the inventory, the results. So you can see this is specific to the V5E-64 hardware that we are training on. And these are the sweeps that I have ran up until now. And you can take in the results from this to get an idea of how the things are checking along. Well, there was some issues with the worker agent. There might be some states that it might not have taken a note of. And after the VM coordinator kind of is upgrading itself, specifically the orchestrator pattern that we see, the continuous loops that are being executed in the background. So this is with respect to the final set of sweeps that have to be run here. I think so. It's taking a lot of memory, and the drill. The sweep to final, the stage 3 and stage 4 should be running right now. Two in progress, to open, 21 tasks, 17 done. So yeah, this is checking along nicely, running along. And the run here for the V0.3 long horizon from the speech to speech translation. This is also running along nicely. These are the per codebook losses I think so. These are a bit still a bit low, but uh, we are at step 74750. Uh, let's get to the ICRA.
The idea is that from a single tool, you can visualize complex data sets, explore embeddings, analyze and improve your models. It integrates with dozens of machine learning tools that you probably already use. Best of all, it is open and it is extensible and it is simple to install. If you'd like to learn more, the links are there in the chat, but also stay tuned. Again, my colleague Eric will be doing a short demo later in the presentation. So let's wrap up the housekeeping items. First of all, give you a quick heads up on some upcoming events that are on the calendar. We have a couple of workshops that are coming up. So if you like to get hands-on with your computer vision, we've got a debugging physical AI models at scale with multimodal data coming up on August 11th. If you're interested in learning how to build visual data agents using tools, skills, and MCP. That's going to be happening on August 13th. Plus, if you're interested in taking a deep dive into annotation curation workflows, that is happening on August 20th. Now, don't forget that this is day one of a 3-day series. So we've got tomorrow as well as the following day additional talks. I believe if you're registered for this event, you should be good to go with an invite for the balance. And as far as in-person events are concerned, this month we will be in Chicago. I think we will be in Chicago later this week. And then the following week we will be in Paris, Zurich, and London. So if you are in these metro areas and you want to come out and see some great talks in person, then definitely check out the Vox 51 events calendar to register for these events. All right, enough yapping out of me. Let's time to get to the research. And if I look to see what today's speaker order is, because I know that we're fighting quite a bit of different time zones, it looks like we're going to start with Devasena, and then we are going to do Jigosh, and then we are going to do Mahati, and then we are going to wrap things up with Ivana, and then my colleague Eric will do a quick demo between the first and the second talk. So let me see if I can find my stop share. And that being the case, that means that the floor is, who did I lose my first speaker? Our first speaker, Devasena. If you are with us, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. That was a wonderful introduction. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen first. And I hope it's visible right now.
It is visible. I think all you got to do is go to full screen, which you just have. You are good to go.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. My name is Devsena, and today I'm going to go over one of the topics that I presented at ICRA recently, which is about using socially supportive robots, but more like the virtual agents, to enhance children's self esteem, their mental well being in general, and also their academics. And just talking a little bit about me. I have my PhD in child robot interaction from the Social and Intelligent Robotics Lab in the University of Osaka, Japan. And I also work as a creative programming instructor for children as well as teenagers at Kinocode Institute. And I'm also a children's author. And I did my master's and bachelor's in robotics and automation and mechanical engineering, respectively, from Amrita University in India. And my technical interests range from human robot interaction, game design, social robots, and all the way to conversational AI. So, getting into the problem itself. When we talk about mental well being from a psychological aspect, it means that it's a positive state about a person's emotional, psychological, and their social health. And when problems in children's mental well-being especially happens, it can be divided into two types, where the first one is the externalizing problems. So this, as you can see in the image, affects the children's external environment. So it's easily visible to the people, like, okay, the children are agitated or aggressive, and this leads to like problems such as juvenile crimes, or which may also lead to adult crime, etc. But there's a more subtle problem, which is the internalizing problem that affects the children's internal emotions. So this is not easily visible like the external problem. So it mainly affects children's mental models, the way they look at life, the way they look at social relationships, and this is not easily visible because children act or may act okay outside, but inside they might be suffering. And this is something that we need to look at more closely than externalizing, and that leads us to the problem. That is, there are many human interventions in psychology and developmental psychology that exist targeting internalizing problems. But there are many limitations of such approaches, which brings us to why we need robots. So, the limitations currently in the human led approaches are that it ranges from children being scared of disclosing certain personal things, or things that they don't like to talk about, to adults, to therapists, or there might be some kind of bias by the therapist itself, like personally if they know the child, or like ethnicity wise, or like social standing wise. And also, humans being humans, we cannot look at multiple channels at once. We can only look at the children's current state of mind. We are not capable of identifying the future or the past at the same time when talking to the child. And again, each human is different, our interpretations are different, so it's not like an AI model that can generalize over a set of training data. So which is why we do not have consistency. And also there's a shortage of trained professionals in this manner. But when we use robots, and this could be robots that are rule based, pre programmed, or AI based, or LLM based, all of these, they have been known to be working well with children because they disclose secrets or shameful stuff to robots more readily than to humans from literature. And these include social robots like Nao, Pepper, Paro, etc. And they're also non judgmental because children know that they're not alive technically, and they also see them as a friend at the same time, which is why they're more comfortable sharing with them. And also it's more easier to integrate AI models into robots for simultaneous multimodal coding, so we can code the children's speech, children's behavior, everything at the same time. And also scalability, so one robot can serve many children. So with this in mind, I want to look at how can robots help children's mental well-being, such as self-esteem and anxiety overall, in both detecting them and helping them improve. So this study today will be about how to help them improve. So this has been divided into two studies that we conducted in Japan. And the first study is to use a virtual avatar of the physical Commu robot that we have in Japan. So this little guy that you see here is Commu. And this is the CG version of Commu that we created. And here what we're doing is that we have the robot avatar side by side with a game that we developed. So we developed a simple 2D game with some 3D elements in it using Unity. And this game is able to communicate with the CG robot in real time. And children just have to play the game while talking to the robot. And the robot has certain behaviors that we modeled, such as based on the progress of the child, the verbal, non-verbal praise given by the robot, or like assistance throughout the game, or like consistent joint attention with the child, and also helping them play certain levels in the game. And we're trying to see if this helps improve children's global self esteem, as well as their peer relationships. So, for that, what we did is first one. So, the role of the agent here is to adjust its real time gaze by tracking the cursor of the child. So, as the child plays the game here, depending on where the child is moving in the game or where the cursor of the child is present, the robot is able to adjust its gaze on the screen. And also, when the child stops playing and starts speaking to the robot, then the robot looks at the child like facing front. And also, it monitors the real time progress and like how many points have the children scored? Are they improving, or is their performance declining? And then how to give them encouragement accordingly. And all of the dialogues and the gestures of this particular agent were rule based in this particular example, and they were all randomized so that the children don't have to hear the same thing or see the same gestures again and again. And there was a Python server running in the background that was connecting both the CG side of the robot to the Unity server. And the game itself, the genre was adventure RPG. So basically, there was this one avatar in the game, an NPC that had to be saved by the children, and the way that they could do this was working alongside the robot. So the robot was kind of like their partner in the game, though it was not directly playing along with them. And it had 3 levels, and once the 3 levels were over, we completed the study. So, to understand the need for a robot or a virtual character, we had two conditions. So, we had one condition where 12 children were playing alongside the robot, and the same game, 12 children were playing just as is without the robot. So, they didn't have a partner, but they just had to like play. And instead of the partner, we gave them hints in the game. So, there was a hints button, and they could press it to get the same kind of hints they would get if the avatar was present. So, just for some uniformity in the variability. And all the children were like 9 to 10 years of age, and we made this a month long study because again, self-esteem and mental well-being are subjects that cannot be targeted with a single study, so we need like a continuous 1 month long study so that we understand how children like react over the sessions in a month. And the measures that we used were we had subjective evaluation to understand the level of global self esteem. So we had a pre test and a post test to see how much it increased or decreased. And to understand the peer relationships, we had another subjective evaluation where we asked them questions about how many friends that they had or how happy they felt sharing secrets with their friends or talking with their friends in general. And then we had some objective evaluation that we did post study, which was we had an ML model that was running in order to find on the video, the recorded video, to find how many times the children looked completely away from the screen. And that is to measure the interest. So we had a bounding box that looked at the children's gaze towards the screen, and when they looked away from the screen we counted it as an instance of looking away from the screen. And this would tell us about how much interest that the children have in the system. And this interest was analyzed if they looked away continuously for more than 5 seconds, because sometimes we look away from the screen, but if it's more than 5 seconds, it means they're consistently looking at something else other than concentrating on the game in front of them. And also, we evaluated engagement, which is nothing but the valence expression of the child. So, we had certain instances of smiling or laughter or excitement. So, based on so this engagement evaluation was not done using an ML model. So this was using an ICC evaluation by two reviewers. So we manually coded the data set, and then we used ELAN to see the instances where children positively reacted and negatively reacted to understand overall what was their valence. And coming to the timeline, we started off with an introduction session. We went to two schools and conducted the study. And after the introduction, we had a pre-test where they filled all the questionnaires, and then they participated in the experiment for a month. And they participated once a week. So totally, each child had 3 sessions with the game. And finally, we gave them stickers of the robot and the post-test. So, just to give you an example of what I've been talking about regarding the game and the robot, here's a video of all the 3 levels and how the robot acts in them.
You did it! Thomas, being your hard work makes me really happy and proud of you. You are so clever. Thomas, I am impressed. Did you see that the color red got added to the rainbow?
Okay. So now that we looked at the system architecture, the methodology, and everything, coming to the results, our primary measure was the global self-esteem. And as we can see from the graph, especially the blue line, in the experimental condition, there was a significant increase from pre-test to post-test. This means that from before the experiment to after a month, children's global self-esteem increased. So by global self-esteem, I mean their overall self-esteem had significantly increased with a medium effect size, whereas the control group remained almost like zero change, so there was no change in the control group. And coming to the peer relationships, in the experimental group, children reported having significantly more friends post study, so they were able to cultivate their social standing and make more friends. Whereas in the control group, we see that there is an increase, but this was not significant enough. And this was by a large effect size. And similarly, with the quality of the friendships, we can see that in the experimental group from pre test to post test, the ease of sharing secrets with the friends significantly increased, whereas in the control condition, we see a decrease in this. So, what it means is that the quantity and the quality of the peer relationships of the children, human relationships, increased. And they also counted the CG agent as one of their friends when they counted like how many friends that they had post study, which was interesting to see. And looking at the interest and engagement, we saw there was an increased positive valence in the experimental group. So all the children over the time, like over the sessions, reacted positively to the agent and the game. So there was no decline in the interest or the valence. Whereas in the control group, we saw a decline in the interest, which is kind of expected when you have to play the same game again and again, even if there's a little variation in the games without an agent to talk to. So, coming to the study two, now that we saw a gameplay situation, we also wanted to test if the same kind of agent in an e learning situation would produce similar effects. So, we had the same agent, just albeit with a different costume, and we put the agent in a math e learning environment. So, Khan Academy is a well known e-learning platform for different kind of subjects, and we chose math for this because it's one of the easier subjects to quantitate as well. And we also developed certain behaviors inside the robot, including joint attention or refocusing back on the sum, and also like predictable movements, giving them breaks in between the study, which was for 45 minutes, etc. And here we wanted to look at their improvement in their academic self esteem. Previously, we looked at global, now we look at academic. So here what happened was that there was a Python server again running real time, communicating between Khan Academy and the agent. So here the agent in this case, the difference is that in the first case, in the first study, we saw that the agent was static on one half of the screen. Whereas here, the agent is able to move around the screen, just like if you remember the Microsoft Clippy that we had way back during the day. So that was one of the motivation behind creating the design of such a movable agent, because this helps the children to notice where they have to concentrate on the screen. And so what we did was have the robot dynamically adjust its position on the screen. So all the XY coordinates of where the question was appearing on the screen was sent from Khan Academy to the robot in real time via Python, and it was able to adjust according to it. And also it can increase and decrease in size. So whenever the children are solving a problem, it is supposed to be non-distracting because we don't want the children to talk to the agent or look at the agent instead of doing math. So which is why we made it really tiny and just made it like point towards the problem, which is joint attention, and then go back to its own desk, sitting and simply silently observing the problem as the children solve. Whereas when the robot is giving breaks to the child or trying to encourage the child to do better if their progress is declining, it increases in size and there's a gray overlay on the screen to capture the children's attention, and then the robot speaks to them. So this is basically the dialogues, which were also again rule based. And the break system was done in such a way that over the 40 or 45 minutes of the whole session that we had, the break was triggered every 7 minutes. And this was because we worked with psychologists to understand what would be the good or correct ratio to give them the breaks. And through trial and error, we found that every 7 minutes is a good start. And Coming to the conditions, similar to study one, in the experimental, we had children solving the math problems with the presence of the robot, and in the control, we had children just solving the same math problem. So we wanted to see that in online learning, which is becoming more and more pronounced these days, children lose interest easily. So if they have to sit and solve a particular lesson for 45 minutes straight, it's really hard for them. So how can we have an agent that can help them refocus and not lose that attention, but at the same time, via its encouragement and its behavior and its presence, also increase their confidence in their academic capabilities? So that was basically the aim here. And all the children were again 10 to 11 years of age. And this was also a month long study where the children interacted once a week. So each child did this whole experience for a total of 3 times. And for measures, again, we had a subjective questionnaire for academic self esteem and an objective evaluation for the math performance. So we automatically logged children's accuracy and efficiency of the math performance of each session from the log data of Khan Academy. And then the same way we quantified interest and engagement from study one, we did it in study two. So again, interest was using an ML model and engagement was by manual coding. And the timeline was introduction session, again followed by pre-test, experiment, and an incentive plus post-test session. So again, here's a small video to help you understand better. So as you can see, the robot is not talking while children are solving. Here a break is triggered.
Hey, guess what? It's time for a little fun. Watching a fun video will give you some rest. Please watch now.
And then a video is played. And once the video is done,
Alright. Time to get back. See this problem here? Please continue solving it.
and then it goes back to its position and goes back to the observing behavior. So that is how the system works. And our results showed that in the experimental group, there was a significant increase in the academic self esteem, whereas almost a zero change was observed in the control condition, similar to study one. And in the secondary results, math performance, as you can see, there was a significant increase over time as well in the experimental condition. So from the first week to the last week of the whole experiment, we see that constantly it's slowly increasing. Whereas in the control condition, it's haphazard, it suddenly decreases, and overall, it still remains decreased from the first week. And in the same with the efficiency of math problems as well, there's a steady increase in the experimental and a steady decrease in the control condition. And we also found that this math performance was correlated with the academic self esteem, which means that when we create systems that target the academic self esteem of the child, it automatically targets their math or academic performance as well, which can be helpful for future designers if we want to look at or target other subjects other than math. And similar to study one, we also saw an increase in the positive balance and a maintenance in their interest throughout the 1 month, which was also the secondary aim of this whole experiment. So, keeping this in mind, I would like to conclude today by saying that this was what we achieved in improving their self esteem and also their peer relationships and their engagement with the system, interest, academics, etc. And if you're interested to see how we automatically also measured their self-esteem using an ML model, an LLM, you can look at our papers that I've linked along with this PPT as well. So the future work of this particular system is that currently we targeted schools. So we are in the fully autonomous yet mild or early diagnosis children. So the y-axis is basically the population severity and the x-axis is how much is a human in the loop. So the autonomy of the system. So currently all our systems were fully autonomous, no human in the loop. And but the children were like mildly diagnosed with low self-esteem or anxiety. Whereas from here, the next step would be to move on to homes, where we move on to more human in the loop. So we want to see that in a more less structured setting, such as like homes, how does it work. And then from there, we go to clinics, so a more clinical population. And finally, the end goal is to have a daily life system where even like with zero human intervention for severe clinically diagnosed children, such a system can help improve them. So thank you very much for listening today, and I'd be happy if you have any questions.
Fantastic. Interesting research. The link to the paper is there in the chat if you want to go ahead and click on it and bookmark it. Two questions. The first one will be around, looks like around the design of the game and the robot, and then one question about the findings. And I'm going to summarize the question around the game and the robot design. So it looks like you used a version of the Commu robot rather than a physical one. What made
Yeah.
a virtual agent the right choice here, and what advantages did it offer for the school-based study? And I guess I'd also add on to that, what's your intuition in regards to if a physical kind of humanoid type of
Mm-hmm.
robot was introduced into the studies? What's your intuition tell you that would that be too distracting? Might it be scary for depending on the
Yeah.
age range? What's the general intuition there?
So that's a wonderful question. So for the first part of it, the reason we used a virtual agent here is that first we are looking at a game that is on the screen. So it's more easier if the agent is also present on the screen so that children are not distracted. And we have conducted studies with a physical humanoid robot as well, which is the physical version of the Commu. So also I can add the links to the papers to the chat. Maybe if anyone's interested, they can see. But what we found interestingly was that the academic performance in the e-learning scenario or the gaming performance significantly decreased when we had a physical robot. And this was because there was a lot of delay between looking at the robot, talking to it, and then getting back to the game. So they were more interested in looking and talking to the robot than the game itself. So it did not serve any purpose that we were trying to look at for this particular scenario. But again, I understand that physical robots are useful in other cases where maybe you don't have any gameplay or you don't have any e-learning. So in that cases, yes, physical robot may be useful. But in our case, because everything, the learning, the gameplay was on the screen, we needed something that did not take away from that. From that, so we had the virtual robot. And we had many ideas of different types of robots to use or different types of designs for the virtual avatar, but we chose Commu because there's already some psychological grounding and theory for the physical version of the robot with children. So it's easier to build upon that base rather than to introduce an entirely new design and then we have variability as to why did we see these increases. Is it because of the robot's appearance or the robot's voice, etc.? So now that we already know why, like what the robot is useful for, we know why these kind of increases or enhancements were seen.
Fantastic. So we'll take one last question. This is in regards to the findings, and you may have covered this, I think, in one of your final slides, but this is in regards to lookaways dropped in the experimental group, but climbed steadily in the control group by session 3. What does that pattern tell us about sustained
Mhm.
engagement over time? And maybe there's an actual hard limit or a cliff that we go over.
Mhm. Yeah. So we saw this in both the studies, the steady increase. So we also saw this kind of behavior in the math performance. So the steady decline in the control and the steady increase in the experimental. And the reason that we see this is that we did not measure this particularly, but we had some qualitative interviews with the children. And from the thematic coding, we understood that one external factor that we couldn't control for was that this was a month-long experience, and children could easily, outside the experimental window, discuss with their friends in the control group what they had experienced. And the children in the control group were kind of demotivated, as into why did not we get the chance to interact with the robot? Why did you get? And so they were overall less interested in continuing with the system. And the second was that the robot itself had an effect in the experimental condition, whereas just as in us doing something continuously the same thing for a month, even as adults we get bored and children get bored more easily, so we saw the steady decline.
All right, and that is going to do it. Thank you very much for
Thank
the
you very much.
presentation. Okay,
Yeah.
and the link is there in the chat if you want to pursue it. Reminder, the talks are being recorded and we shall upload them to the Voxel 51 YouTube channel. So with that said, Eric, if you are with us, it is time for a quick demo.
Excellent. Thank you, Jimmy. So great presentation. Thank you. So yeah, thanks for tossing it over, Jimmy. I am Eric. I am at Voxel 51, work with Jimmy. I am a machine learning engineer on our product team. So work as a product manager and then also on our customer success team. So talk a lot with our customers about kind of what are the pain points in their AI development, and then get a chance to build that into what we're doing here at Voxel 51. So just want to spend a few minutes today just talking a little bit about what we're doing here, and especially for this audience, talk about some of the exciting new robotics and physical AI focused capabilities that we've been releasing over the last few months. So yeah, like the core of what I want to talk about is really data flywheels. So over the last few years, it's become apparent just in the industry that successful AI projects often succeed or fail based on the capability of their flywheel for their data processes. So how efficiently can you go from running your model to kind of identifying where your model's performing well and where it's failing? And then for those failure cases, how quickly can you improve your data and then bring humans in the loop to improve your data sets, to then retrain your model, to make up for those failure modes, and then quickly identify the next failure mode. So the faster that you can make this data flywheel or data engine, the more likely you are to be successful in your AI projects. So this day and age, there's been a lot of really exciting new technologies that have been coming out, especially in the physical AI space. So going from these like modular robotics-based pipelines to end-to-end vision language action models, it's becoming a bit of a paradigm shift with some new tasks and different types of data that we're working with that makes this problem more challenging. But the core need for this data flywheel, where you can curate your data, annotate it, and evaluate it, still stands. So that's what we're building out at 51. We've have a lot of customers that use our platform for building out data flywheels. And I want to show you a little bit about some of the new updates that we're making for physical AI specifically. So I'm going to jump over into a demo for the rest of this, just to show you a couple things within 51. So first thing I want to show is some of the type of physical AI data sets that we support. So the first step of having efficient data flywheel is being able to actually visualize all of the data that you're working with. So for example, if you've got some different episodes from a robot, first and foremost, you need to be able to actually see what's happening in there. So within 51, we make it very easy to be able to pull up our UI and then visualize, for example, the log data that you've got. So we have native support for MCAP visualization of these data sets, which does mean all of the different topics that you might have in your MCAP files, you can visualize those. So with this new UI, this is something that just came out over the last few weeks, is this new and improved like multimodal data set visualization. You can visualize all different kinds of sensor data. So from point clouds to images, we have this customizable UI for visualizing the different topics that you've got. So for example, if we want to add another image tile that shows maybe some of the depth data that we've recorded from this robot, we can visualize that. If you want to visualize plots or logs, it's all kinds of different per scenario visualizations that you can pull up. So for example, we can pull up some of the XYZ poses of the robot and then visualize like the time series data here. So this goes beyond just visualization though. So you can also, visualization is just one small part of a data flywheel. So really you also need to be able to take a step back and be able to work with your data set at scale. So that means being able to interact with this data. So for example, here we've got this robot, it's just a pick and place task where it picks up a block and then places it in this drawer. So maybe we want to flag an event here. So we can say, we can just, lasso this little piece of the timeline and then say this is where the robot is picking up an object. So not only can you add different types of information and like tag events in these samples, but you can then pull out and then actually see your data set at scale. So this is the first part of where 51 comes into play, is taking it out of just per episode visualization to being able to then query across your entire data set. So for example, we just flagged something interesting in one of the episodes. We can then filter by these temporal tags for where the robot is picking up an object, and then see, the corresponding episodes related to that. So this is the first step of being able to really drill down across your entire data set to query and look for interesting scenarios. But it's not just manual annotation. So I'm going to jump over to a different data set here. This is new scenes. So similar, physical AI use cases where this is also MCAT based. We see some different types of topics that are available in this one. We've got some IMUs for the vehicle as well as geolocation. We also have some perception labels that we're visualizing here. And with this, we also have some metadata that's indexed across our data set. So this is kind of one of the pillars of a data flywheel, is being able to efficiently curate across your data set. So for example, there's all kinds of different data that we can filter by. For example, the Z max acceleration. So up and down, show me all of the episodes that had the most up and down acceleration as this vehicle was driving. So with just point and click, we can then filter and find all of these scenarios, pull them up, and then immediately visualize the scenarios that match our queries. And in this case, if you think about it, what are you seeing when a vehicle goes up or down quickly? Let me switch this to the front camera. In this case, the vehicle is going over a speed bump. So with just a click of a button, we can find, all of the scenarios where there's some kind of like bump in the road. And even more than that, you can have all kinds of complex indices that you can then create on these multimodal data sets that you can filter by. But it's not just your metadata. With 51, we also have the ability to visualize the distributions of your data sets in an embedding space. So being able to bring in AI models to index your data through the standpoint of embeddings. So we take a foundation model, run that on all of the sensor data that we have, and then we can visualize these clusters and identify, what are the different artifacts that might appear in this data set, lasso some of these, visualize these episodes. And in this case, this is the droid pick and place data set again. We can color all of these by success or failure of the robot task. So here we can then quickly identify different clusters where the robot succeeds in pink, where the robot succeeds in gray or fails in pink. And then we can find some interesting things, like this cluster here is mostly failures, these are mostly success, and this one has a mix. So this might be interesting to be able to bring some humans in the loop. So from here, we can quickly take our data set, curate it to find potential mistakes, evaluate what those mistakes are. And then that brings us to kind of the last piece of the data flywheel that I want to talk about, which is annotation. So we can lasso this cluster of mixed success and failure cases where the robot is clearly having a hard time. We can save this as a view. So these are our failures. And then we can jump over, and then we can now bring in some humans to actually review this data or re-annotate it. So we can say, review failures, and then actually bring in a human in the loop team, for example, if you're working on very large scale data sets. This may be too much for one person to do. So you can create different tasks. So I can go ahead and say, for this failures subset of my data set, we'll want to bring in some people to annotate that, can configure who that is, go ahead and start this workflow, and then jump in and actually go through some of these tasks. So I can then jump into this annotation task, and then for each one of these episodes, we can review what's happening. In this case, this is a failure. This is where the type of annotation that you can do can vary, but 51 is very flexible. So if you want to do, for example, the temporal event tagging that I showed previously, you can do that. If you, for example, have some kind of chain of thought reasoning from a VLM that you might want to review, you can In this case, this is a custom plugin that I've built to be able to visualize those captions and be able to edit those in place. So maybe this one looks good. I can submit this VLM chain of thought reasoning. In this case, this one, this is a lot of examples of the robot picking up clothing or like cloth. And the issue is actually that it accidentally grabbed the back of the chair as it was trying to pick up that clothing item. So we'll say, robot grasped chair accidentally, and then save that, and then kind of continue through this process. So through that, we're able to now annotate this data, improve the quality of our data set, which can then bring us right back to retraining our models, redeploying those new policies to our robots, gathering more data, and kicking off the next iteration of that data flywheel. But yeah, so gonna stop there. Just wanted to give you a bit of a tease of what's going on in 51. If you're interested, check out our docs for some of this new multimodal functionality or any of the other things that I've discussed for whatever AI project that you're working on. And I'll toss it back to Jimmy with that one. Thanks
you
for the
very
time.
much. Awesome. So if you want to learn more, either head on over to the 51 docs under the multimodal subheading, or head on over to vox51.com if you want to learn everything that we're up to here. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thanks.
All right. So with that said, I think we are ready to move on to our next speaker, which is Zigosh. If you are with us, the floor is yours. And I think that you had two papers, I want to say, at ICRA. Maybe that is the case.
Yes, I hope you can now see my screen, right?
We
And
see your
also hear
screen.
me.
You're good to go.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi all, and thank Jimmy for having me here. I'm Jagosh, and I'm a PhD candidate at Autonomous Robots Law at NTU in Norway, working with Professor Kostas Alexis. Today, I want to talk about, as mentioned, two lines of work that we both come to the same idea. So it's we want to create a paradigm that which says that it's not enough for the robot to know where to go when we are talking about motion planning, especially, but it's also the robot per se needs to know what to look at. So through this talk, I will go through two papers which we recently presented at ICRA 2026, so this year, which will capture and cover the semantic inspection with autonomous robots and also active perception for navigation for robotic systems. So this set just give you a brief roadmap. So first we'll be talking about the semantic inspection, where we design an R policy, so reinforcement learning-based policy that finds and visually covers specific objects of interest instead of mapping the whole scene or industrial environment, you can think of it. And this work was published in RAL, but then presented this year at ICRA. And the second work is about active perception, where we aim to jointly steer the motion of an actuated camera as well as the motion of the robot itself. And that was submitted and presented also at ICRA 26. So both works share the same backbone idea, one can say. So everything runs from onboard sensing alone, so we don't have access to any external infrastructure, so everything runs on the robot, and also no privileged information about the environment is given to the robot. So the robot needs to either perform the inspection in unknown environment or perform a navigation task with active sensing in this unknown environment. So starting with the semantic inspection, so to give you an idea what it's about. So classic exploration coverage planners try to first map everything in a scene or in a let's say a limited environment, which ends up being a slow and resource heavy because you need to map first everything, and you don't really care what is really important for inspection. So real inspection missions care more about specific objects. You can think of industrial objects like pipes, tanks, cracks, whatever, like any kind of industrial object that you think that the human inspector needs to go and visually check if the system is still operational. And therefore, there is no need of mapping all the environment. We just can focus on specific objects. So the goal became to build policies which know what to look at and also how to look at it such that the mission time can be reduced and entire performance can be more efficient than the classical approaches. So how we do that? So everything that the policy sees comes from onboard sensing. So first, starting with the depth image, which is masked by a semantic segmentation image. That's what you see in the bottom. So the segmentation image gives us or gives the network information which pixels belong to the target class of the object that we want to inspect, such that it can find it in the environment and then perform inspection. Then we also provide the state of the robot, which is the position, orientation, and its linear or and angular velocities to provide smooth motion or to be able to learn smooth motions. And lastly, we provide also egocentric occupancy grid and visit score grid, which allows agent to remember where it has already been. So based on those two maps, it can navigate such that it knows where, if I have been here, as well as it knows where is the occupied region such that I will not collide with it. So those all are given to the agent to provide as observation along with the previous action. So what is important here to mention, all those observations are coming from onboard sensors. There is no external localization or nor pre-built maps. So that's really important to mention. So then we train this end-to-end in the simulator. So there are two really important design choices that we made for this to generalize well, especially for the real-world deployment. So first is the reward, which we kept quite minimal and simplistic, such that it's easy to follow and also understand for the robot what to optimize for. So first, it's a face mesh coverage term, which to differentiate which parts of the object were already covered and which are still not observed. Then we have a voxel visit score map, so VT here, which encourage the agent to find any viewpoints for inspection. And lastly, the PT term, which cares for, it's like a collision penalty, which cares for safe motion. And then second important design choice was to train entirely on the primitive shapes. As you see in the video from time to time, we train on really primitive shapes like boxes, cylinders, and spheres entirely in the simulation. Nothing which is sense specific later for the deployment. And the idea behind that was quite simple. If the policy can learn to inspect a cylinder, it should also generalize to anything roughly cylinder shape in the real world, like a pipe or a tank you can think of. And this leads us to actual deployment after training in the policy. So the policy is trained purely in the simulator on those primitive shapes. And then we dropped it into real scenarios like here. So first is the inspection of this spherical light chamber, where the policy finds in a known space the robot, like the agent or the robot here finds the object to inspect, which is then found by this segmented depth image, which is now highlighted. And based on that, and also based on those two other maps, it tries to fill the coverage up to 100% such that the whole surface will be covered. What is, as again, worth to mention, like everything is processed on board without any information of the environment beforehand. So all the map that you see also in the left bottom corner, it is online map built alongside the mission. Once the drones finishes the coverage, we exceed the time threshold, and then we process to the next mission. And also we show it for more than just one simple object inspection. Here in more industrial settings, we perform multiple semantic targets mission in one go. So we start with the red pipe, which will be highlighted in a second, and then the robot will continue to the blue barrel and finishing with the yellow hydrant. So what is again worth it to mention here, no prior knowledge about this environment. Robot detects based on the segmentation mask the objects which needs to be inspected. After exceeding a time threshold, it switches the mask to the next objects and looks for them in the environment, finds them, inspects. Once the time threshold is exceeded, it changes to the next object in a row. And we depict also those surface coverage plots in the bottom left corner. These are processed, we obtain them in a post-processing after the mission. So after completing the mission, we build the meshes of the objects, and then we are able to run those coverage metrics here. And within this, we show that with unseen real semantics, we can get on average around 96% of the coverage. And a full multi-object mission that I just presented to you, like pipe, then barrel, and the hydrant, takes about 157 seconds end to end, which makes it way more efficient than the standard classical approaches, which will involve first robot to explore the unknown environment, map the objects, and then perform the inspection. Here we just skip the mapping part. We just jump directly to the inspection, allowing us to reduce the mission time significantly. And quite importantly, this also involves zero environmental specific tuning, which means we can deploy the policy in any environment without any kind of parameter tuning, which is not the case for classical methods. Also, we compare the method, our proposed method, with the SOTA baseline, so classical approaches in simulation studies, getting around 95% coverage with far less inspection time. That's what I already mentioned. So with no prior per environment fine tuning and also way less inspection time. So we with this purely inspection learning based method, we are able to reduce the mission time quite significantly. Also, the code paper and the video I linked here. If you want to dig into details more, feel free and go ahead. But then I will also jump already to the next part of the talk, which is about this active perception. So what we observe also during while working on the inspection part is important how the policy chooses the viewpoints. Sometimes part of the objects cannot be covered with the just fixed forward-facing cameras, and sometimes you need to adjust the camera with respect to the robot to better cover objects. And we also did one step backwards and didn't apply this idea for inspection. We first evaluated and deployed for slightly simpler task, which was the autonomous navigation task. And these days, most of the approaches, especially RL navigation policies, assumes that the camera is rigidly mounted to this to the robot here, the drone will be presenting, and with that, the robot can only see what is straight ahead of it, and it's complete, or one can assume if there is no memory involved, then it's blind to anything that is just outside of the first room. So we ask here the question, what if the camera could move too with respect to the robot? So the robot navigates, but also independently, as with humans also navigate, we also moving our gazes all around and also rotate our heads while navigating from A to B. So why robot should also be doing the same? And then it's not about just deciding not just where to fly, but also where to look. So the payoff is quite obvious: safer flight and more richer situational awareness, essentially for free, when we switch from this static camera to the active camera, or actuated camera to be precise. So then how it works, how we train it. Also end-to-end in the simulation, we provide the robot with this first or observation, which are quite similar to what we saw in the inspection case. So the robot state, but now we don't have the position of the robot with respect to the world, but we have the position with respect to the goal, denoted here by G. But then we also extend it with the camera orientation. So the robot should also have a feedback where the camera is currently pointing. Then we have similarly the depth image and the local occupancy grid. How it is built along the window of depth images. We can create those local grid map, occupancy grid map, which will inform the robot if there is some occupied region that robot might collide against, such that it also ensures safe flight during the mission or during the navigation. So how does the policy works? We trained end-to-end in simulation, and then the policy outputs six-dimensional action vector, which composed of a velocity, linear velocity, so 3D XYZ velocities, and the yaw rate, which are which are defining the navigation action terms. And then we also add now the pitch and yaw set points for the actuated camera to where the agent should point camera towards. So both actions are commanded by a single network, trained, as mentioned, end to end. So the perception control or camera control never comes at the expense of safety or goal-reaching behavior, which is quite important. So the interesting part is not really the network per se, but how we train it to achieve this motion. So the reward which guides this behavior consists of 4 terms, namely goal progress, which rewards the agents to get towards the goal, here depicted in the green dot. Smoothness, which is the penalizes the jerky motion of the camera as well as of the agent. And this is the most important part now, is this information game. So you see the depth camera frustum on the left. So we reward the agent based on the voxels that flipped from unknown to known in the privilege information which we have in the simulator. Therefore, that's what actually drives camera to look around proactively rather than just focus on the goal. And finally, the collision penalty, which pushes the robot away from the nearby occupied space, similarly as we had for the inspection. So just to show you how it flies in real world, we deployed on highly cluttered corridor environment where some of the gaps are almost as small as the two times robot size. So there's really not so much space to navigate in. And then also here we present the camera orientation, like the camera oriented, not really dependent on the robot motion. So on the left, we depict the camera angle histograms, pitch and yaw, which vary along the mission, increasing the awareness of the robot such that it doesn't collide with the object, although they are not currently in the field of view because they were able to, like the robot was able to see them before. Next, it's another example in the T-shaped corridor, where the camera moves around to increase again this situational awareness to find the gaps in the environment where the robot can pass and go through, while again trying to reach the target. So the moving of the camera doesn't compromise the navigation success or performance in general, which is not the case for the static camera policies, which will be shown in a second, where the robot truly have forward-facing camera, and then the navigation performance is decreased quite a lot. So in this setting, since the gap is quite narrow, the static camera policy fails here. So we make the environment less challenging, where the robot then is able to navigate. It ends up in the really erratic motions you can see compared to the actuated camera policy, and also in the mid-flight collision, as indicated right now. So we show with it that active perception allows us safe flight as well as better awareness about the robot's surroundings. So that's like the very first takeaway from this work. Second is, as mentioned, safer flight. With actuated camera, we can anticipate obstacle way faster and also point camera to the regions that are right now directly outside of the flight path. But it might happen that in the future, the robot will take this path, and therefore the agent already anticipated those regions beforehand with the camera, and we validate the approach quite extensively within SIM as well as in the real world experiments, and compare with the static fixed forward-facing cameras, where we show that with active perception, the robot is able to build way more richer spatial awareness compared to the static camera approaches. Again, the code, video, and the paper links or QR codes. You can go ahead and scan and go a little bit more deeper here, because as mentioned, I will just briefly cover those two words. But now you can also ask about why we just want to reward the agent based on purely voxel-based information game. And this is like a little bit a follow-up that we are going to present in IROS this year. So if you are going to be in IROS, you can also catch up with us and have a chat. We replace those let's say, purely naive voxel-based information game with a signal which comes more, or it's you can that comes from the human attention models. So humans bring priors attention and semantics to where we should, or we as humans, we are looking. So if we are navigating, let's say, corridor, there are parts of the environment that we as humans anticipate more than, let's say, a straight or empty floor or straight corridor. So we built here a gaze LNN, which is a lightweight liquid neural network that predicts human-like fixation scan paths. Live on board, so we can also feed them as a prediction to the robot camera policy that I just presented. The advantage of it is that it's quite tiny with 0.61 GFLOPS and about 99% lighter than the next best model. Also, since it's so light, we were able to run it on the NVIDIA Jetson Orin, which within 6.84 milliseconds for one inference step. Therefore, we were allowed to do a navigation task with this model. And also we perform simulation tests on the dataset where we also got new state-of-the-art results, like just pointing out here the scan match score of 0.47. This was, as mentioned, a joint work with my colleague Fatma, and this paper will be presented in IROS this year, so in almost 2 months from now. And that to give you some kind of idea how it looks like. So we here mark with the colored voxels like green, blue, and red, the regions that the gaze LNN produces. And we clearly see that there's regions within the environment that
Recording in progress.
of those policies. On the other hand, the next quite important takeaway here is that the active perception improves in general robot awareness, and that's what we get almost for free. So we just need to make the camera to move independently with the robot, and then by jointly learning camera control, we can, with the navigation of the robot, the agent is able to capture more of the environment without hurting the navigation performance. And lastly, the human attention models can be run on board and provide more human-like camera behavior for robots, which is then we can give some more human-like behavior to the robot while using active perception. So put all those together, it's not just about where the robot goes from A to B or if it's inspecting one object, but it's also the way how it chooses to look at the way. So with that, that's everything from my side. So if you're interested, all contact information are here. And thanks for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, let's take two questions, one for each paper. The first question on the semantic-driven paper, and I'll summarize the question here, is that you trained only on primitive shapes like boxes and cylinders, but the robot did end up inspecting concave objects. Were you surprised by how well it was able to generalize geometry that it had never seen?
Yeah, so the point of those primitive shapes is that also in simulation during training, we randomize the positions of obstacles as well as of those semantic targets. So sometimes, because of those randomness in the position, we end up also during training having concave objects there. And therefore, that allows us to generalize also, let's say, to non-seen objects since the randomness during training is so high.
And then let's take one final question, and this is on the final paper, the reinforcement learning paper. And this is, I think, in regards to the videos that you were showing where it was flying through the different corridors. In the T-shaped corridor, your policy reoriented the camera to scan the lateral branch before committing to a turn, while the static FOV baseline got stuck. You even had to remove panels. I'm assuming they were those plywood panels just to get the baseline to complete or compete. What did the experiment reveal most clearly about the value of active perception?
What really active perception gives us is that the robot can still manage to go from A to B, but it's more aware about its surroundings. So it's also what we are now also investigating in the future work, like how we can combine this active perception for inspection tasks, where you have those different viewpoints that you truly need to inspect fully the objects. So like the active perception and this independent motion, let's say, with respect to the robot is quite crucial, along with the memory. So that we have captured those parts of the environment. So it's not just a feed-forward network. We have this local grid map, which uses the information from the camera, which can rotate with respect to the robot, to build this local occupancy grid that especially gives us some kind of or more safe or safer flight. And on the other hand, it allows us to find the paths way faster than, let's say, baseline static camera methods.
Fantastic. Awesome research. I've included links to both of those papers there in the chat. I will also gather up the other links. Obviously, there's some code and some other good stuff that was posted there. We'll gather all that up and we'll put it in the video description. Thank you very much for the presentation. Awesome research.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So with that said, let's keep it going. And that means that we have our third speaker, which is going to be Mahati. If you are with us, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So let me just quickly share my screen. All right, so I hope that my screen is now visible. Yeah, perfect. So first of all, I would really like to thank you here, Jimmy, for giving me the opportunity to speak here. It's a really fantastic crowd here, and the talks were quite interesting so far. So I would like to continue the enthusiasm by talking about my work here, which is on safe and stable motion planning via neural network dynamical systems. So I am a postdoc at the Learning Systems and Robotics Lab at TU Munich, and my work is basically using controlled theoretic methods. So that's basically my background, and providing some sort of guarantees to robotic systems. And here we'll basically be looking at motion planning, a learning-based motion planning paradigm, while learning from demonstrations, and try to see how we can incorporate guarantees into it to make sure that the behavior is both safe as well as stable in terms of robustness. So let's first talk about the motivation for this work before I get into the methodology. And the idea is to basically go from traditional automation, where, in the last, decades or so, what you'd mostly seen in industrial automation is that you had like fixed repetitive tasks, for example, part inspection or so on, where the robot arms were bolted into the environment and basically continuously performed the hard-coded task. And this works as long as you don't really have any changes into your environment or your task. But the moment that you introduce some kind of changes, then this will all not work properly anymore. So the idea is to basically move forward to flexible industrial automation, right? This is what we need now, where you have robots as a service becoming ubiquitous, which means that these same robots need to perform multiple tasks, maybe at different time instances in different environments, and you also want customized solutions per the customer needs. And in order to do this, you want to build generalizable robots. So you want to have robots that can perform diverse set of tasks. And this is why it becomes important to move from manual hard-coded programs, which, of course, not only are they not as adaptable, but they also require a significant programming expertise, but instead move into learning from demonstrations. So here, basically, you just need a domain expert who knows how to perform the task to show the robot what needs to be done. And then the robot, with minimal programming intervention, can imitate these demonstrations and do it generalizably. So essentially, if you have a new task, just collect new amount of data and then teach the robot this new task, right? So it gives you that flexibility and generalizability that traditional manual programming or manual motion planning generally lacks. And this is what we're going to be looking at. And as I said, I do come from a control theory background. So this talk is going to be slightly mathematical. So I hope that you can follow through. But in principle, I will provide some intuitive details to every mathematical equation so that it's easier. But let's start with, the first step, which is basically the collection of the demonstrations itself. And of course, we want to teach robots, tasks through demonstrations. So we need this data. And in principle, this data can be obtained in so many different ways. So the most popular way, and the way that I collected my data from for the experiments for this methodology, is using kinesthetic data. So this is basically quite a popular approach for manipulators, because you can simply just manually move the robot around and collect the data through proprioceptive sensors. But the other possible opportunities are also using teleoperation, or maybe even passive observation, collection from video data, and so on. And this is something that I wouldn't be talking about. But once you have these demonstrations, you have only a finite set of demonstrations, right? So the goal is to perform this task as well as possible with as little data as possible. And then, in addition, if there are any disturbances in the environment, the robot needs to somehow react to this while still performing the task. So one thing that imitation learning algorithms really lack today is that they are not good when they encounter out of distribution data, right? So this is something that we really want to solve. And this is what we need. So we want to reduce the number of demonstrations while at the same time improving robustness against disturbances. So as I said, I do come from a control theory background, so which basically means that I have always, in most of my career, worked with mathematical models. So in control theory, you have some kind of a mathematical model describing the system or the behavior. And then using this model, you can immediately understand the properties from it. So you can essentially estimate how this model would perform, because I have access to it in the form of, for example, differential equations or so, right? But we are in a learning-based framework, so we are trying to use data. So one thing that we can do is use these data and to learn something that is interpretable, like a model. And then once we have that, we can analyze these properties that we want, like safety and so on, and then make them robust and safe, essentially, even with just a finite amount of data that we have. And this is where dynamical systems come in. So the first thing, if you've taken a control theory course, is that you learn a dynamical system. It's essentially taking a bunch of it's basically taking a bunch of states and outputting the vector field, or rather the direction in which the system needs to evolve, right? And this is exactly what we will be learning over here. So we have a set of position and velocity data samples that we collect from the robot in a kinesthetic way. And we have a finite set of demonstrations here, n number of demonstrations. And then we try to fit in a vector field or a dynamical system that encodes this data. So essentially, this vector field is this function f that takes your state, which is the position of the robot, and outputs some velocity or the direction in which the robot needs to move. And even though we have only a finite set of demonstrations, this f is defined for every point in the workspace. So no matter where you are, there will be some direction that the robot can move to, so it will never get stuck. But what we will see later is how to control this direction and make the robot go where we want it to go. And like most imitation learning algorithms, our goal is also very clear. So we want to basically minimize the mean square error loss between the learned model and the actual data that we have. And doing this, we will end up with a dynamical system that will guide the robot where to go. So having said that, we still have some problems. So the first thing I already talked about is that we only have a finite set of demonstrations. So they are unable to imitate every single possible behavior. And so we want to use this dynamical system framework to guide that so that we know where the robot should go depending on where it is currently. And then the second thing that we want to tackle is that in most industrial automation settings, humans are working on the factory floor with these robots. And ideally, you want these humans to work in tandem with these robots. But it is possible that there is a human error and the human accidentally pushes the robot and prevents it from performing the task, right? So what we want is that the robot to react instantly and still perform the task even if it is disturbed. And this is what basically counts as a disturbance to the environment as the robot in the setup. And we basically want the robot to be robust to these disturbances. And finally, there's also the possibility that there are some obstacles in the environment, and we want some kind of a collision avoidance against these obstacles. And this, of course, should also hold true irrespective of the disturbances that the robot encounters in its environment. So how do we bring in this robustness and obstacle avoidance into the framework? This is basically the main part of the contributions of this paper. And what we basically see is that we can use, again, because we have a dynamical system which acts as a system model. So this is not really a robot system, right? It's basically just a high-level motion planner, but it still functions as a system as far as control theory goes. So we can actually use these tools from control theory and bring it in order to analyze the properties and provide guarantees. So there are two very important frameworks that come into picture here. So the first one is the Lyapunov function framework. So Lyapunov functions help us provide stability or convergence guarantees. So it basically tells you that no matter where you are, the robot would always converge to the goal. And this would happen no matter which point it is in the workspace. And as a result, you kind of have this disturbance rejection properties, because if there's the robot is moved slightly even, then the robot will still converge to the goal and perform the task. So essentially, a robot, this is like a quick illustration. So the dotted path is the intended path for the robot that is being planned by the dynamical system. And there's some kind of disturbances that perturbs the robot into this yellow path, this yellow point. And now, even though this is not exactly in the intended path of the robot, it would still converge to the goal by using this Lyapunov function to guide the robot. And then secondly is the obstacle avoidance, which provides you safety guarantees. And this is called as the tool that we use over here is a barrier certificate. So a barrier as the name suggests, it kind of acts as a separating plane between the safe region and the unsafe region. So we have an obstacle over here, and this is basically the barrier certificate. So it acts as a barrier between the safe part, which is the intended path of the robot, and the unsafe part, which is the obstacle. So it essentially tries to, and what the barrier certificate does is, again, guides the motion plan away from the obstacle so that it can still converge to the goal. And so essentially, the Lyapunov function and barrier function are both two independent entities that guide the robot to perform its task while maintaining disturbance rejection as well as obstacle avoidance. So I hope that the intuition is pretty clear. So we will now move on to a little bit more of math. Here I explained basically how a Lyapunov function works. It's basically just a real valued function. So it takes any state or position vector of the robot and translates it into a real valued, into a real value essentially. And this value should always be positive. And that's a condition that you have. And secondly, what you want is that as the robot moves in its path, the value of this Lyapunov function is consistently decreasing. And as it decreases, it moves into these smaller ellipsoids. These are the level sets of the Lyapunov function. And yeah, as it decreases, it essentially enters the minimum point, which is the value of 0, and converges to the required goal. So this is essentially the behavior of the Lyapunov function. And a barrier function is quite similar, works very similar, but it doesn't require to decrease every single time instant. But what you will see is that there's this boundary between the safe region and the unsafe region, and the decrease triggers when it hits the boundary. So when it can go towards the obstacle to perform the task, but as soon as it goes close enough to the obstacle, it will trigger the safety reaction where the dynamical system or the motion plan has to be guided back into the safe region and thus avoid the obstacle. And both of these provide you guarantees by construction. So the way that these Lyapunov functions and barrier functions are constructed, they give you safety and stability as long as the required constraints hold. So here you see the constraints required for the barrier certificate. And in the previous slide, you had the constraints for the Lyapunov function. And if these constraints hold, then I have safety and stability in my motion plan by construction. And so what you can do is basically transform your imitation learning algorithm by adding these constraints. So you have the safety and stability conditions, and as long as they hold together, and here at this point, you will basically learn this dynamical system along with this tools that you have, the Lyapunov functions and barrier functions together, such that these constraints hold. And once you have that, you basically have a motion plan that is absolutely safe and stable by guarantee. But this is a very complex optimization problem, as you can see. So first of all, it needs to learn this function f over a space of infinite possibilities. And also, in addition, it needs to learn the Lyapunov and the barrier functions. This makes it infinite dimensional. So this is in principle not tractable. And secondly, it is non-convex because the Lyapunov function and the barrier function and the dynamical system need to be learned simultaneously. This makes it highly complex. And one way to actually reduce this complexity, as we know, is to use neural networks. So which is what we're going to do. So we're going to use neural network parameterizations and learn a dynamical system as well as certificate, which are all neural networks. But the moment we start learning a neural network, we learn over a finite set of data. And this basically means that your challenges are that you still not eliminated all challenges. First of all, you need to learn them simultaneously. Then you want to make sure that all the constraints are satisfied, not just over the data that the neural network has seen, but also over unseen data, so that we have out of distribution guarantees. And it should be able to handle arbitrary nonlinear motions, highly complex motions, and at the same time deal with complex obstacle shapes. And this is basically what we're going to be looking at with this methodology. So to give you a very brief overview, so we start with a set of demonstrations. So here consider that the robot needs to learn this N shape, starting from this initial set over here, converging all the way to the goal in this N-shaped form. And we have an obstacle in the environment as well. So starting with the training data set, neural networks are parameterized for each of the functions that we want to learn. And they're trained with a specific loss. But then we don't have any guarantees yet in the learn. So you may get a nice little imitation motion, but there's no disturbance rejection or safety guarantees with the learned dynamical system. So what you do is instead learn these certificates simultaneously, but not only with the current data set that you have, but you can use a sample-based verification technique, generate counterexamples, see where there are violations, safety violations, and so on, and then add them to the sampling and train this in an iterative manner. And once you do this, you kind of get a sample-based guarantee. You're sure that for some n number of samples, you have guarantees, but this does not, of course, hold true for the n plus first sample, right? So we also perform, in addition, a conformal prediction, which is a post hoc verification on your learned dynamical system and the certificates in order to guarantee that these safety certification holds also beyond the data that you've seen. And once you have that, you have something like this. Essentially, the gray arrows are basically the vector field directions. So you see that they're always pointing to the goal, which is in black. And you see that no matter where the robot will end up, the robot will eventually converge to the goal, and it will also, take this N shape that you kind of wanted the robot to. And then you also see that this green region is the barrier. So as long as the robot is essentially disturbed within this green region, the robot will also be guaranteed to be safe. And then once you have this, you have a dynamical system that gives velocity commands to the robot in real time, and then the robot can perform its task. And this is basically this, as I described, this is basically the verification framework that makes this method formally certifiable and formally correct. So you have some kind of correct by construction guarantees. And maybe I don't have a lot of time, so I will just quickly jump through these steps. So the first step is basically the training. So we have 3 kinds of losses that we include, and we want to simultaneously learn the dynamical system as well as the certificate. So we have 3 kinds of losses. So one is the mean square error loss for the imitation of demonstrations, and then we have a stability and safety loss to ensure the satisfaction of those constraints. And then once we have this learned, so we also want to ensure that these constraints are satisfied throughout the workspace. And for this, we have 2 steps. So one is the counterexample guided training, so where we add training violations and repeat it until we don't have any violation. And then the second one is a probabilistic verification technique, which is using conformal prediction. And with as few samples, as a few 100,000 samples, we can get probabilistic approximation PAC guarantees, essentially. So you ensure that with a certain amount of confidence, your constraints are satisfied. So I will not go into very detail on the split conformal prediction method that we use, but essentially it scores the violations of the constraints that you have and ensures that the score is as low as possible by using statistics on a calibration data set. So essentially, you have a maximum violation of across all of these constraints, which is S of X, and then you apply some statistical technique, for example, as shown here, and then what you end up with is this probabilistic guarantee that your score, the maximum violation score, will be less than a certain value, with at least a confidence of 1 minus beta, and this probability of 1 minus epsilon will hold. And if your P is less than 0, then all of my conditions are satisfied and with this confidence, and this is exactly what I need for a significant result. So then just moving on to the experimental part. So what we do over here is basically learn a bunch of handwriting motions on a Franca Amica Panda. So we start with a 2-dimensional Lhasa handwriting data set, which is all of these shapes as seen over here. And then we also have a kinesthetically collected robot data set, which is this W shape with multiple obstacles. So what you see, the key features are that, number one, the robot can actually also learn from unsafe demonstrations. So for example, over here, the blue parts are the demonstrations that have been collected, and the pink and the brown are the simulated and the robot data. And you see here that the demonstrations that are collected are unsafe. And this could happen for a number of reasons. You could have collected this data a long time ago, and then maybe after that, the setup has been changed. And so you don't want to recollect the safe data, right? So what happens in this case is that the robot is still able to learn this shape without actually violating the safety constraints. And what you also see is that it works for arbitrary obstacle shapes. So all the way from convex to concave shapes to, you don't have, all you basically need is an analytical expression of the obstacle. But one thing that I would like to note is that we mainly work with static obstacles, so we don't have any online dynamic modulation here. So you just learn and then plug it into the robot real time. And we also can do this for 3D robots. So maybe I'll play this just for a few seconds. And what you will see here is that the robot is actually completely blind. So there is no perception that's involved. So all you have done is learned this motion plan, this reactive motion plan offline. And what you see is that as the robot is perturbed, it can still perform the task. It will still imitate the shape that you want it to imitate without violating your safety or, without violating your safety bounds, while also converging to the goal. And I can also quickly, it seems that I can't forward it. But those are the experiments. So we have like a bunch of experiments from different shapes. So I think it might be boring to see all of them, but you get the idea of what we've done. So what we also did was basically compare to some baseline approaches. So one of the state of the art was using polynomial dynamics. So instead of neural network parametrizations that we used, they used a polynomial parametrization of the dynamical system and did essentially a model-based optimization, formulated a model-based optimization algorithm and solved that. But that is, again, very highly intractable and very complex to solve. Learning-based approaches with neural networks do much better. And this can be actually seen with this benchmark that we did, where we consistently get lower mean square error, meaning there's a higher imitation, there's a better imitation of the shapes, while also having, in general, lower dynamic time warping. This is basically how quickly or slowly does the robot perform its task with respect to the original data. And both of these metrics we perform relatively better. And what's even nicer is that we have all of these features that the state of the art doesn't have. So we can basically look at any arbitrary obstacle description. We get less conservative safety conditions. And with this sampling based and post hoc verification, we get good guarantees without compromising on the performance of the robot. And as you can see over here, we also get larger safe regions, meaning that there's more room for the robot to move in comparison with the state-of-the-art approaches. And with that, I would like to end my talk. I would also like to thank my co-authors who are not here, but they did quite a bit of work along with me, and also the funding agents. So I would like to also quickly mention that we have the code base and the link to the paper, everything available in this QR code. So this paper was published in RAL 2026 and was presented this year at ICRA. So I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic research. Let's take two questions. The first one is in regards to the claim that you can produce safe trajectories even from unsafe demonstrations. And I think this was shown with the angle and the worm data sets.
Yeah.
The question is, can you explain how the system reshapes a demonstration to be safe while still preserving its essential shape?
Yes, so maybe I can quickly go through the figure and explain so it's easier. Okay, so what happens is that we always start, how the training algorithm works is that we start with a initial guess for the dynamical system. So we have like no certificates involved. We just solve the, learn a neural network, basically imitating the demonstrations by minimizing the mean square error loss. And that's our initial guess. And that's the best possible guess, irrespective of the stability and the safety constraints that we have, right? And then once we have that initial guess, we kind of modify the neural network until the safety and stability constraints are satisfied. So what happens is that you initially learn very close to the unsafe dynamical system, and then the certificates bring them lower and lower to the point where it becomes safe through this iterative training approach. So that's how it goes from basically unsafe demonstrations to a learned safe trajectory. Does that make sense? I hope, yeah.
And then we'll take one last question, and this is in regards to the counterexample. Let's see, the counterexample guided training loop that keeps adding violating points until none remain, then runs a final verification pass. And I guess the question is, how did you arrive to this two-phase design? Were there other ideas that you were thinking about, or did the data tell you to pursue this one rather quickly?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question because we struggled on it quite a lot. So there are multiple ways to actually verify neural networks. So this is a very well-established theory, especially in control, where you had like have a bunch of model-based techniques. So one of the most common approaches is to analyze robustness of certificates using Lipschitz constants. So it measures how far the output will change with respect to the input. And that was our first that was the first idea to try it on our robot as well. But then it really didn't scale well because you need, I don't know, hundreds and thousands of samples in order to get that certificate. And there's a neat trade-off, right? These are also very nonlinear motions, and nonlinear motions in general exhibit high Lipschitz constant, so you need more samples. So it leads to this curse of dimensionality issue. And so we wanted to move away from that. And then we thought, okay, we could do conformal prediction. But the initial, for conformal prediction to hold, you also, it's a statistical guarantee, right? So so even if you train on like a few 100,000 samples, it really depends on your calibration data set, you might have much larger scores. So one way to actually reduce that was to use the sample-based counterexample guided training, which is also quite a common approach in computer science to identify bugs and so on, but this is something that has not been applied as much to learning. So we kind of combined like several ideas from different fields into this. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we're going to go ahead and leave it there. Thank you very much for presenting the research.
Thank you very much for listening.
Awesome. And quick reminder, all the talks are being recorded. We'll gather up all the links and include them in the video description. So if you want to stop your share, I believe that we are ready to have our final speaker. Ivana, if you are with us, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Let me just share my screen.
Good to go.
Perfect. All right. Okay. So hi, everybody. My name is Ivana Collado Gonzalez. I'm from the Robust Field Autonomy Lab at Stevens Institute of Technology. I'm a PhD candidate there, studying under Professor Brendan Englot. And I'll be presenting my work towards versatile optoacoustic sensor fusion and volumetric mapping for safe underwater navigation. I'll try to get through it a little fast so everybody can end on time. So first of all, I'm going to just give you a brief introduction to underwater vision research, its application, industry interests and challenges. Then I'm going to present our work, motivation, methodology, experiments, results, and conclusion. And then last of all, I can chat a little bit about learning-based approaches in underwater research and why most of them struggle a little bit. So first of all, underwater vision research has a lot of applications, including coral reef monitoring and preservation, aquaculture, fish farming, oil and gas, defense, and renewable energy, but there are many more. Industry currently relies mostly on underwater human divers, and I cannot stress this enough. This is one of the most dangerous jobs on Earth. It's super, super risky to do this. That is why it presents a very high cost to hire a human diver to perform either maintenance or inspection tasks underwater. And you don't just have to pay for the diver, you also have to pay for ship to transport the diver and all the equipment to wherever your offshore application is. So it is extremely costly. On top of that, human divers have operational limits. So there's only so much water pressure that a human body can withstand. So human divers have a limit of how deep they can go. On top of that, there's also a time limit of how much time they can spend underwater. And that really depends on how much oxygen they can carry. So this is why industry is really interested in the development of autonomous underwater vehicles, which could be potentially perform mapping, inspection, and maintenance tasks in a lot of different applications. However, AUVs, or underwater vehicles, also have a set of challenges. The main challenge is that they don't really have access to GPS signals, which is how, above ground robots localize themselves in their environment. So they rely on onboard sensors to localize, including inertial and velocity sensors. However, this leads to localization error or drift. And one way to mitigate this error is using SLAM, which is simultaneous localization and mapping, using visual features in your environment to correct this localization error, and then be able to perform tasks such as navigation, mapping, and reconstruction. So a lot of the underwater vision research going on nowadays, they assume that we're working in crystal clear waters with an abundance of visual features, which will then allow them to do feature detection, feature tracking, perform SLAM, navigation, reconstruction, etc. There are places on Earth that look like this, beautiful, beautiful places off the coast of Mexico, in the Mediterranean, places like that. However, there's also a lot of underwater environments that look a lot more like this. So on the right, we have a clear water environment. However, there's not a lot of features in there. There's a little bit of sand that maybe you can use, but there's other cases where you're just looking out into the blue ocean, and it's very hard to localize in those cases. On the left-hand side, we have a turbid water environment. Turbid water, as is obvious, I think, it makes it really hard to see, really hard to be able to detect and track features reliably. And the thing is that there's a lot of different causes for turbid water, but two main causes are actually humans. Like humans cause that. The first of all, it's pollution. So we cause a lot of pollution and cause turbidity. And then on top of that, also human activity. We kind of pick up sediment while we're moving around in the environment. So even if an oil gas company decides to build their structure out at sea where there's clear water, once they start construction and they start moving sediment around, they'll create turbidity. So we're basically creating our own problems. So that is why underwater research is so hard, because we're working with these very challenging and unpredictable environments. Current perception methods are highly sensitive to the non-uniform lighting, feature sparsity, high turbidity. So the creation of robust perception solutions for safe, reliable operation in these harsh conditions remains an open research problem. So now that I've set the stage, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our work. So our main motivation is improving AUV autonomy and safety. AUVs, some tasks that they're required to perform require large-scale mapping, while others require close-range reconstruction. However, they should be able to safely operate in both clear and turbid conditions. So we aim to provide more reliable sensing and mapping solutions across diverse conditions and scales. So on the right, we see, well, we're looking at a very turbid environment here with these two little videos. On the right, even though monocular vision is usually high resolution, it is unreliable in turbid waters and lacks depth scale information, so it's very hard to use in order to plan, reconstruct, etc. On the left, technically we could use sound, which is more robust to turbidity and non-uniform lighting. So this is actual footage from our sonar sensor. And in case you're wondering, yes, it's kind of the same technology that we use for ultrasounds to see babies. So sound is robust to turbidity, however, it has low resolution and elevation ambiguity. So in order to explain what I mean by elevation ambiguities, on the left, we can see that this is the horizontal sonar view, and we have multiple beams going out at different angles, and we know exactly what angle our return is coming from. However, on the right, we can see the vertical sonar view, and even though we're getting a return, we have no idea which one of these red dots really the return came from. So we don't really know what the elevation angle of our return is. And that is what elevation ambiguity means. So that's what makes reconstructing or using just sonar so hard, because we don't really have the full 3D information. So our goal is to provide a sensor fusion and mapping method that works in diverse settings, prioritizes reliable and risk-sensitive information or close-range data, can be able to reconstruct complex geometries in real time, and doesn't require sonar datasets or multi-view data. So there's a big problem with requiring sonar datasets is that there's so few people actually working with this equipment nowadays, and even less people that open up their datasets to be a public use. So relying on a sonar dataset is really a big problem, because there's really not a lot out there that we can use. So now I'm going to move on to our method. First of all, we've set up a robot with 2 orthogonal forward-looking imaging sonars and 1 forward-looking camera with overlapping fields of view. And we're going to leverage the overlapping vantage points of these sensors. First of all, we're going to perform sonar to image matching, trying to leverage the distance from a sonar range return while getting elevation from the optical image. We're also going to be performing stereo sonar matching within the limited field of view where the 2 sonars overlap. So that field of view is given by red and blue here. So here's our main pipeline. As input, we're going to take the camera image and the 2 sonar images. We're then going to perform image segmentation. As I mentioned previously, in turbid water, it is really hard to detect point features and track them reliably. So instead of doing that, we're going to detect regions of interest within the image. And we're going to do that using a very simple deep learning approach. We're going to use YOLO nano segmentation model and take advantage of just transfer learning techniques. At the same time, we're gonna try to extract features from our sonar images, and we're gonna do that using the SOCA CFRAL filter, which is a variant of the constant false alarm rate technique, to detect salient features and get rid of a lot of noise and second returns from our sonar sensor. Then we're gonna start our stereo matching. Again, we can only perform stereo sonar matching within the limited field of view of the two sonars, which is given by these red lines in this bottom images here. And we're gonna match features based on range within this field of view. And this formula here in the bottom is gonna give us fully defined 3D points in space. So now that we have our point cloud, we're gonna project it onto our region of interest seen here. And we're gonna use the region of interest to kind of get rid of maybe noisy returns. So any points that land outside of our region of interest, we're gonna be discarded as noise. And we're gonna keep the rest of the points and use them for the rest of our algorithm. Really important part of this method that we presented here is that in case there's no useful information from our camera, we really can't see anything, we're still going to be able to use our stereo sonar point cloud, the raw stereo sonar point cloud, and we're still going to be able to map our environment. Even though maybe it's going to be a little bit noisy, it means we're still going to be able to operate safely, even if the camera is basically useless. So sonar is sparse and noisy, so there is a probability that not all features will be detected by both sonars. On top of that, the overlap region of the two sonars shrinks as it gets closer to the robot, which means that the objects that are closest to the robot are the most probability of being missed, but they also present the most risk of collision. So instead of getting rid of these unmatched features, we're going to save them, and we're going to try to map them to 3D locations in space. So we don't have elevation information, as I previously mentioned. So what we're going to do is we're going to map them to every single possible angle that our sonar is giving us. So we're going to map them to all the elevation angles that we can. And then we're going to project them onto our camera image, onto our region of interest. So horizontal sonar features will be seen as vertical lines, as seen here in this example. Any points outside of the region of interest will be discarded as noise, but we're going to keep the ones inside, project them to 3D space, and create our second point cloud, which is our sonar to image point cloud. On top of that, we're also going to use our camera image to try to expand our sonar field of view. So sonars have a limited vertical field of view, and we're going to use this camera image to try to expand that field of view, as can be seen here in this middle image. We're also going to get rid of the points we previously used, but those projected to 3 will create our final third point cloud, which is our expansion point cloud. Now that we have 3 different point clouds, we're going to assign a confidence value to each one, depending on the assumptions that we made when we created them. So for stereo sonar point cloud, we are pretty sure that our stereo matches are correct, so we're going to assign a high confidence value. For our sonar to image point cloud, we are assuming that points have the same depth or distance within the sonar vertical field of view. Given that this is a small field of view, this is a fair assumption, and we are going to assign a medium confidence value. For our expansion point cloud, we're assuming that points have the same depth beyond the sonar vertical field of view, which is not always the case, so we're going to assign a low confidence value. We're then going to use these confidence values in our Gaussian process mapping algorithm. In a standard Gaussian process mapping, all the points have a constant noise variance, so all observations are treated equally. In our approach, we're assigning each observation its own noise variance value that reflects the reliability of the source. So our point count confidence values are inversely proportionate to the noise values assigned during mapping. And now we're going to move on to the experiments. We did experiments both in clear water tank settings and in turbid water marina settings. So we have a couple of examples here. First of all, I'm going to show an example of our robot in our tank setting. And this is the tank we have, thankfully, access to at Stevens. In the top, we can see the 2 sonar images and the sonar features being detected, as well as the camera image and the camera image being segmented. In the bottom, we can see the final reconstruction of our structure. So here's the final result. Our approach is shown in the middle, and we're comparing it to other state-of-the-art reconstruction methods. As we can see, our approach is able to capture the changes in geometry of this structure. We're also getting good coverage overall of the scene without incorporating kind of a lot of error like the other approaches have. Now for the second example, now we're going to be looking at also in the tank, but two very similar structures, which can be very challenging for sonar, using sonar in this case. Again, in the top, we can see the two sonar images and the features being detected, as well as the camera segmentation. And in the bottom, we can see the final reconstruction results. For results, our approach is shown in the middle compared to other baselines. Again, we can see that our approach is able to capture the changes in geometry of both structures. We have a reasonable coverage of the scene without incorporating just extra erroneous information. Final, I'm going to show our testing in the marina settings, and this is highly turbid water. We're going to be looking at these wooden pier pilings. So again, at the top, we have the sonar information, the camera information, and the bottom, we can see the 3D reconstruction coming to life. Some of the pier pilings are diagonal, so you're going to be able to see some of the diagonal artifacts coming into view in the 3D reconstruction below, as can be seen here. All right, so this is the final reconstruction that we were able to obtain. Again, some of the pier pilings that we're looking at are diagonal, and we can see the diagonals here in the reconstruction clearly. There's also two very, very small metal pipes sticking out in front of the pier pilings, and we were able to capture those in a reconstruction, which I believe is very impressive because other algorithms just were completely blind to them, and they were the most risk of collision with the robot. Also, we're able to keep some of the background information. Even though it looks kind of noisy, this information is extremely important for an autonomous robot trying to perform path planning in this kind of cluttered environment. So in conclusion, our algorithm outperforms a lot of state-of-the-art methods in accuracy, and we're able to map very complex geometries while keeping good coverage. Also, we can map structures of varying scales, even in low visibility conditions, and we prioritize critical close-range data to enable safe navigation and manipulation. So for future works, we plan on incorporating maybe dynamic environments, improving our sonar camera calibration strategy, and maybe trying to do a more adaptive sensing or adaptive changes of our confidence values depending on visibility conditions. So that's it for my method, but I thought it would be interesting to just chat a little bit about learning-based approaches and why they're very challenging for underwater research. There is a lot of methods trying to synthetically correct for turbidity, and so trying to correct the dehazing or color correction. However, we don't really have ground truth, clear versus turbid ground truth. So that really means that we are completely reliant on unsupervised learning, which creates kind of a training instability and causes hallucinations. Also, because the water presents such a different physical model every time you change kind of the wavelength or one of the many factors that contributes to turbidity, a lot of the models end up failing or just overfitting, so failing when you try to change them into a new environment. On top of that, most of these approaches are too computationally expensive to work in real time on an onboard computer. For a different kind of research, very relevant to what we're doing here is monocular depth estimation. However, because of turbidity and other things in the water, such as backscatter and moving marine life, just kind of self-supervised approaches that attempt to do this are really failing because of just there's no consistency across samples. And on top of that, it's really hard to model. There's a lot of optical distortion when trying to put a camera inside of kind of a canister underwater. You get a lot of warping because of the ports that we're looking through and just the changes of the lens that that extra glass gives you, which causes a lot of geometric errors in reconstructions and depth estimation. For sonar 3D reconstruction, the elevation ambiguity, just kind of the loss of 1 degree of freedom, trying to invert the 2D images provided by the sonar back to 3D is just a very ill-imposed optimization problem that's extremely hard to solve. On top of that, we don't really have a lot of data to work with, as I mentioned previously. And we have a lot of different types of sonars, not just one. So we can't really generalize one sonar to the next. We really have to be very specific about the kind of data that we're using. And sadly, the simulators are getting better. They're really, really getting better. There are a lot of people working on this. However, it's still really hard to have a realistic synthetic data from simulators. On top of that, most 3D reconstruction methods that use learning are not really viable for real-time execution quite yet, maybe someday. And then for the multimodal fusion, which is kind of what I presented today, there's a lot of data scarcity. Again, if there's scarcity before with just sonar data, getting sonar data paired with camera data in a data set is extremely hard. And then also you add the calibration complexity into the problem of how do we calibrate a sonar which has elevation ambiguity with camera returns, and it's just a very, very difficult problem to solve. On top of that, the few works that use learning to solve this problem are usually neglecting just kind of turbidity. They're just assuming we have clear water. Hopefully that'll change soon, but it's still a very hard problem to solve, even in clear water. And the few that do exist are too computationally heavy for real-time embedded deployment on the field. So that's it for me. Feel free to check out our lab website with all the links to the papers and the videos and everything. And I hope you found this interesting, and let me know if you have any questions.
Fantastic talk. I think the takeaways that I'm getting is that it's orders of magnitude more difficult to develop autonomous vehicles underwater than it is above ground. Not saying that running into a pedestrian 200 feet below the water is a likely scenario, but it does seem that not having the data sets, right, that are available for a lot of people developing autonomous cars, for example, is an easy thing. But obviously, moving through water is different than moving through air. But let's take two questions. The first one is in regards to the trade-off that had to be made with cameras give resolution but fail in turbid water, while sonar is robust but low resolution and elevation ambiguous. Did you try other ideas before arriving to stereo sonar with monocular camera as the right way to get both? Were there other ideas or designs that you tried and abandoned before arriving on this solution?
Yes. So I actually have a previous work that I only used one camera and one sonar, and that was pretty successful, except for the fact that there's really the stereo sonar allowed for a subsection of the returns to be true 3D information, just like there is no ambiguity in this stereo sonar overlap. If we're just using one sonar, one camera, we're really adding some ambiguity into the problem, because even though we're matching the camera to the sonar, there could be errors in that matching process. And so it's hard to get the full 3D geometrical information. And let me just look up one of the results. Here we go. So this result here on the right is actually my previous work with just one sonar and RGB camera, and it just can't deal with the changes of geometric structure. And it's useful still for like cases where you're just looking at pure pilings, but if you have more complex geometry like this one, it just stopped working. So the stereo sonar information was really, really important in that case.
Cool. Okay, so this question is around the choice to not use sonar intensity for feature matching and instead relying only on range. What was the thought process that you went through as to why intensity was unreliable given your 90-degree sonar configuration?
That is a great question. So that really came from because the intensity varies on a lot of different things, the material that you're looking at, but also like how much of the sound ray bounces off the object. And that depends on how your object is shaped. So the horizontal sonar sees a very different object than the vertical sonar sees. So the intensities were not going to match if the object looked like this, kind of very slim and vertical in the vertical field, very short in the horizontal field. The intensities values are very different. So I decided to get rid of that because it was getting in the way of my matching.
Awesome. And we will leave it there. Super interesting
Thank
research.
you so
Thanks for
much.
presenting. All right, awesome. We will leave it there. Quick reminder, all the talks are being recorded. We shall upload them all to the Vox 51 YouTube channel. We'll send out one email probably on Wednesday afternoon that will have links to all of the talks from the Best of Icarus series. Don't forget, this was just day one. There are 2 additional days, tomorrow and Wednesday. I want to thank all of our speakers for taking time out of their day to present their research, and for the attendees taking time out of their day to join us. Thank you, everyone, and I hope that we shall see you tomorrow and on Wednesday. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. We'll leave the Zoom open for another 15 to 30 seconds.
So this was fun. Let me get back to the emails that we are going through. This is DeepSeek V3 feature request, migrate ML model, unit tree, G1 gripper control, multi-camera streaming. This, I think so. Teleoperation and data collection plumbing. In Lee robot cameras. Gripper control, multi-camera streaming, robustness, flicker fix, soft start and smoothing. Use diff KV for transformers modeling backend. Robot type definitions. Feature request on device, persistent memory with cryptographic identity binding. Agentic world models. Safety. RL. Let's see what are they doing here. Objects next to good target IDs. It's got prompt tokens for SFT. Ship labels. Resize. SFT -1 by T. Is the group relative advantage for GRPO, and as these guys here A1 to AG being re kind of inserted into the policy model. So you guys can see the reference model and the reward model which it comes along from, and the R1 to RG, the reward groups. So rollout prompts. The GPU advantage estimates multiple samples, multiple completions or rollouts per prompt, referred to as the groups in the GRPO. So we have touched upon it, I think so, in one of my previous research paper reading groups or somewhere, but uses the rewards of each rollout to form a baseline. Articletic algorithms like PPO. Same advantage value is assigned to every token T in completion. This is the unclipped objective. This is the clipped objective. policy or importance ratio, GRPO loss function. So the clipping objectives, and what they're doing here is using agentic RL to train RL LLMs on any task, and they have a harness that can do all of these things, provide instructions, present all tools, parses and executes tool calls, acquires any tool outputs or observations to the agent, manages the visible context for the agent, or runs the agent in the loop to solve multiple step problems. So these are the functions of harness, the single turn rollout, and the multi-turn trajectory. You can see here, these are the LLM outputs or actions. Here, this environment is using tool call, and it's kind of working towards that. Asynchronous RL with disaggregated architectures. World models. Eco. Environment cross entropy hybrid objective. Okay. This is a great article. This blog, like Cameron Wolf, he has detailed multiple things regarding the overlap, length ratio, Jacquard, novelty, among other things. He's at Netflix, that's why. So, Large domain, Android domain. Let's see, and world model training. So you have to have policy here. This is the trajectory, observation. After a long time, I have come across a RL policy being used somewhere. Interesting. The talk that we had, they were using it for the trajectory in drones. And here they are using it in the world model kind of environment. I think so. This is the Qwen 3 8B is the initially trained via SFT over 15K export trajectories in different terminal environments. OTSFT and Qwen 314B. They are being used to do here. Fourth lang, deep dive. Yeah, these prediction tools. I don't know about deep dive. I don't know about fourth lang. This is specifically related to internalizing the details of the programming language. Deep dives. Or a similar metric, I think so here. papers. So except this, I should be sharing to my people and the computer vision community that yeah, going through this again because like this has many things that could be used in the research for agentic training to the world model. Like this can be used as a environment for as I was showing earlier in the Alpamayo, the NVIDIA's simulator. I think so. I have that open somewhere. So for going through the trajectories of the vehicles, the pedestrians, the robots, like in a simulated environment. The harbor harness runs off in 16 environment turns. Worklog and this guy here, deep dive. So they kind of train on the tool outputs as well. Let me see. System, lookout, run code, thinking, total. Yeah, this is really good. Blog by Cameron. I don't know if he is training this because the things that he has written, these are only things that can come out if you have certain experiments that you are running and are working towards combining different aspects from different papers to like experiment. So I think so I should be able to share this work on X as well. There should be something here. Yeah, sharing Facebook email X. Agentic world models by this guy here. Open Substack. Yep, I think this will be expanded. Yeah, for science. More than $3,000 in cloud usage credits. It hasn't been expanded. Yeah, this is the blog. Yeah, he has been experimenting on this a bit. Let me delete the earlier one. Good blog. Well, let me put on some loops. Auto update failed, TPU failed, this failed, that failed. Don't know what passed then. Everything is failing right now. I want to terminate this. Let it execute here. Think so. I should be giving a brief description of the research papers that was discussed today and the agenda along with that. Mm. Let's do for 10K. Let's wait a bit, or I should be executing it via tmux. Yeah, go ahead with the $10K run, but first give me the best patterns for each phase and the hyperparameters you that you have shortlisted here. Heavy events, nickel, communication, arrival path. S4 Pro 64 chips. Composition proof. Execution. Pre-flight. 10K by baseline. 30 minutes. Post run. Is SFT happening here? Or will it be happening later? Is SFT happening after the post run, or are there any other steps? It's still running. I thought this would be. Oh, this is complete now. 23:34. $76 to $50. I got to work on that. We'll have to make the checkpoints available on the HF model card. Is this executing on Tmux? Oh, so it moved totally on the host 0, on the worker 0 of the slice. As I instructed it to. And everything seems to be working fine. So this is like how it should be working on this. The fallback strategy. Yeah, this is kind of like good. Can we upload all the checkpoints from this recent run in the public version of the v0.3 Hugging Face repo, because the private one has restricted 50 GB of storage. Yeah, I think so. I should flip the existing repo public then. What do you guys say? Let's go ahead. You live once. YOLO. Yeah, uh, do a rate aware version. Rate AWARE. Rate aware. Anyways, I'm completely exhausted right now. It's approximately 1 in the morning, 1 in the night. And I should be finishing this and that. The other guy is sending notifications right into my mobile app. And the last notification that I received was on 00:48. So if you guys want that, you can also subscribe. For that, what I will need to do is make a tweet and tell the people to notify to get some notifications there. Mm, could you make a tweet tagging AK Nayan and Karpathy regarding the baseline sweeps that you have completed in full detail, and uh, informing about the TPU topology being used along with the set of sweeps that is happening right now on nanoGPTJAX, and the steps that are in the works right now. Also include the WANDB URLs, maybe a super sweep URL, and a PR1 URL in which people can see the commits that have happened. Also invite people to contribute and add comments on the PR. Limit reset. The usage limit was there. How can it be 100% now? Just a couple of minutes ago, we like had gone into detail regarding this. Now V6E16. What the hell is this? Make a long post with context relevant emojis. I do not want 10 different tweets, but a single long tweet will do. What was the... So what is this? Yep. Okay, then. What is Karpathi's? Karpathi only. V6E16. I don't know why is it confused. Only running on V5E-64. Why is it V? Like, There are so many things that I would like to fix, but yeah, that's mentioning some of the. Oh yes, initially we used V6E-8, but not 16. Yeah, dash 16 isn't present. No, Mon plus Adam W. Yeah, so that is well, let's stop here. I don't know how this session limit, the usage starts, got to 100% with 94% of Fable being used. Here it shows 490, here it says 420. I don't know where the 1 minute gap is right now. Yeah, I think so. Oh, I should be calling it a night, and we'll see you guys tomorrow then. I had to upload all the checkpoints and everything too, which I will be doing tomorrow, and we'll be streaming then.